On a cold January evening in 1987, a 39-year-old nurse finished a day of skiing and began the drive home. She never made it. Her green BMW would be found abandoned at an Interstate 91 rest area. Weeks later, her body would be discovered in a secluded wooded area just miles away. Barbara Agnew's murder remains unsolved, but investigators have long asked an even bigger question. Was Barbara Agnew the victim of the Connecticut River Valley killer? Before the headlines. This is where we do what Grace and Gavel does best. Before Barbara became a cold case, she was a woman with a life. Barbara Agnew was 39 years old. She was a registered nurse. Friends described her as independent and active. She enjoyed skiing and spent the day doing something she loved. Like so many victims we discuss on this channel, it's important to remember that Barbara wasn't born a mystery. She was a daughter, a friend, a professional, and someone who expected to go home that evening. The timeline. Let's talk about the timeline. January 10th, 1987, there was a ski trip. Driving home, going to Interstate 91 rest area. The BMW was discovered. Evidence suggesting a violent encounter was also discovered. The search begins, and the body is recovered months later. Why Barbara matters. This becomes the heart of our episode. Instead of asking who killed Barbara, we're going to ask, why do investigators continue to connect Barbara to the Connecticut River Valley killer? Ultimately, it is because she meets a series of criteria that several of the other victims also meet, which puts them in the same criteria, the same pattern. Ultimately, this was a roadside disappearance. This was an abandoned vehicle. Generally, this individual seems to be a person who tries to find women who are alone, who are unsupported, who do not have people around them to be able to protect them or save them. A remote body discovery. She was found in a secluded area. Repeated stabbing. It was in a rural corridor in Vermont, New Hampshire kind of area. There's an active timeline and no publicly identified motive other than wanting to potentially harm someone. And let's talk about the pattern. So what we're going to do is, what do investigators actually look for when deciding whether crimes are connected? Ultimately, what they're looking for is victimology, meaning what do the victims have in common? Just to give you an example, for instance, Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was known to essentially attack women who were of a certain type. And among that, they had dark hair and they parted their hair in the middle. And that seemed to be his type. And so that would be an example. If you find a serial killer who's killing women who have dark hair and it's parted down the middle, that would be a scenario where that is a modus operandi or his signature. Additionally, geography. Geography has been very important in the Connecticut River Valley killer crimes, right? We're talking New Hampshire, we're talking Vermont, as well as transportation. Some of these women have actually been subject to the crime based on hitchhiking. Again, they're alone, they're vulnerable, things like that, as well as potentially not having transportation of that sort. The method, as we know, is stabbing, almost frenzied stabbing or repeated stab wounds. And the behavior has been to essentially be in a secluded area so that it's basically him and them alone. And additionally, the risk, ultimately the risk is going to be any woman who seems to be by herself, who seems to be at certain locations that are isolated, secluded, and likely not able to be rescued because it's in such a remote area. If you go back to Catherine Milliken, she was actually bird watching and was a doctor studying birds. And so I think that that's really important. And so ultimately, they are women that are vulnerable. They may not realize that they're vulnerable. For instance, Ellen Freed, for instance, I mean, she was a lady who was on her cell phone. She was a nurse as well. She was on her phone, not on her phone, but on a pay phone, making a last call, was concerned about her car, all sorts of things, and then she ended up disappearing. So again, it's very much a motive of opportunity rather than specifically picking someone. And so let's talk about the questions that investigators still face, because we're not sure what they know and what they don't know, given that they're probably holding some back for the investigation. But was Barbara specifically targeted? Again, that is something that I think that they're likely working on. Was she chosen because she was alone? Most likely is my belief and my scenario. I think that it could have been any person who was going to be at that rest area that day. Why leave the vehicle? I mean, I think that's also an important thing. It may have been a scenario where she was trying to get help. Maybe she was trying to get away. Any number of things. It's really difficult to ask that question. And the other thing you think about is why transport the body? There were a lot of, from my understanding and from my memory, there were a lot of things left from Barbara Agnew in the dumpster of the rest area. And so ultimately, it's why transport the body? Well, ultimately, I think that there was an idea that if they transported the body, it could buy them more time. And there are certain cases, excuse me, such as Cordemanche, Bernice Cordemanche, as well as like Eva Morse. I think she was gone for a long period of time, relatively. And so that, I think, is almost him trying to buy himself more time, is what I would say. And was this one offender or more than one? And ultimately, I know that if you followed the series, if you want to definitely go back, it's still on there on Grace and Gavel, Grace_and_Gavel. You can go all the way from the beginning of the series, and we talk about what we know thoughtfully. Additionally, that is a question that keeps coming up. Is there one offender or more than one offender? And if you've heard of the gentleman who made a confession, which wasn't really verified, he talked about there being 3 people that killed Barbara Agnew, kind of abducted her, and then those 3 killed her. So ultimately, we don't know. I think that this is still an ongoing investigation that's been going on for some time. My hope is that maybe DNA will potentially be able to answer some of the questions that we have, because it's extremely important, especially in that area. So in closing, Barbara Agnew's murder remains unsolved. Decades later, investigators still don't know who took her life. What they do know is that her case shares remarkable similarities with several other murders committed throughout the Connecticut River Valley during the same era. Whether those similarities point to one killer or several remains one of New England's greatest unsolved mysteries. Barbara deserves more than to be remembered as a possible victim in a larger story. She deserved to be remembered as Barbara Agnew, a woman whose family is still waiting for answers. Thank you for tuning in to Grace and Gavel, where truth meets compassion. My name is Buffy. I'm an almost 18-year criminal defense attorney. And if you got value in this, please consider liking and subscribing. I greatly appreciate it. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, and hopefully you'll come back and see us again soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.